Welcome to the Ola Hawatmeh Show on American One. My special guest today, Eric Hohman, Air Force vet, then ran for Congress in Texas and now runs a nonprofit. Up next. Hawatmeh on American One. My guest, Eric Hohman, thank you for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. No, it's I didn't want to pass up the chance.
Now, Air Force vet who served as an elite combat controller with 2 Bronze Stars. Now, tell us a little bit, elite combat controller, what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually kind of weird to talk about myself, but I'm getting used to it. Combat control, we've been around since 1953, and usually any major engagement that the U.S. has engaged, terrorists, or whether it's even in, combat control is a little bit different because even during times of peace, combat controllers have been sent out to control air traffic. So our main bread and butter is that anything that flies in the sky, a combat controller can control it without a tower, without a radar. So part of our 2-year pipeline, which is our training program, is going through air traffic control school. So then when we were at war, we get attached to different special operation forces teams, and then we're the air-to-ground liaison. So if we get in a firefight, our job is to call in close air support. If a guy gets hurt, calling a medevac. And it could be, like I said, anything that flies. It could be a drone, it could be a cargo plane, a helicopter, a jet, anything that's in the air, a combat controller controls. And so we are part of that team. So sometimes a combat controller will never drive, but he can be a gunner, he can be on the passenger side, he could be a breacher. He's just part of the team until all hell breaks loose. And then it's our job to get on the radio, call in air support. And then you're shooting and moving, communicating with not only your team on the ground, but the aircraft that, above you. And I've always said it's the 4th dimension of a warfighter.
Wow.
It's the air piece that makes us so elite, I guess. And, out of 20 guys that started this training program, only 4 of us made it. So I think our attrition rate at the time was about 87-90% of guys still make it. It's very difficult. Yeah, not only physical, but you got to be kind of a smart guy to go through it.
Absolutely. And now when you were assigned to Afghanistan, you were the sole combat controller. So it was just you. How was
exactly.
That?
So
what were the challenges? I mean, I'm sure
so I guess part of it, it's pretty cool because you do get to meet a lot of different teams. So I worked with ODAs, which is our Army Special Forces team most of the time. I did work with the SEAL team. Then I worked with a couple of coalition forces. So a combat controller can only be assigned to special operation forces just because there's only about 350, 360 of us, period, at one time. So during the war, we were being farmed out to different teams all over the world. So, Afghanistan plus a couple guys were somewhere else. But we just don't have that many guys. And it just makes it to where, every time you join a new team, those guys have been together for years and you're the outsider coming in. And, every time the rookies or the younger guys were like, why's the Air Force guy here? And kind of, there's always ribbon between forces, but when it came down to it, they knew the power that we brought to the battlefield and what we could do to an enemy with click of a button, basically.
Well, it's amazing. Like your strength, I always say, mentally, your mind it's mind, body, soul. And it's amazing. And during all of this, and then you run for Congress. And but, I mean, that's just, amazing. And then after Congress, then you start your own nonprofit. You just keep going and going, which is amazing. Tell me about that. Like what made you decide to run for Congress?
I had a pretty cushy job in Austin. I was working for the Health and Human Services Commission. And, the whole thing with the border and, just a flooding of, people just not using the designated crossing points, and they were just flooding the country. And I remember sitting there. It's like, well, I'm still an able body, and I want to serve. I love Texas, so I want to protect my state and my country. And and yeah, I went up to my boss and I was like, "Hey, man, I think I want to run for Congress." And he obviously looked at me. He's like, "You're crazy, but okay." And I said, "All right." So then I researched it a little bit and put in my money because you got to pay like things like $3,000 or something crazy. And
Yeah,
then I resigned. So yeah, then I resigned, and yeah, people were just kind of taken aback of like, "What are you doing?" But yeah, I just wanted to serve, and I just, I think a lot of I've heard you say, a lot of these politicians have become career politicians. They're rhinos, or they're just all about themselves. They don't really care about the people they represent. The only time they care is during election time. Other than that, they just,
absolutely.
they go back to their evil ways, and I
Totally
think
agreed. I
it's
love your
good.
background story too of how you started. I mean, your parents were
Mm,
immigrants and you came the legal way. You worked hard, served our country, ran for Congress, and started
yeah.
a nonprofit to help others.
Yeah. So after, I guess almost right about the same time, I had been out of the military probably about 8 years. And a good friend of mine who was my first supervisor as a combat controller, I started off as a military police, security forces, it's called in the Air Force. And I'm telling you, I was not a military man. I was like, I'm just going to do this to get my college degree and I'm out of here. And then 9/11 happened, and that's what turned, I guess, every patriotic bone in my body turned into fire. And I said, well, I want revenge. So I met a combat controller. He told me about combat control, and that's how I cross trained. But the first supervisor I had, Chris Rush, he did 20 years, multiple Bronze Stars, Purple Heart recipient, super great guy. And then 6 months after leaving the teams, he committed suicide, and to me, that was, I guess, my next calling was as sad. I would give anything to have Chris back, I mean, and his family would too. I mean, I would give this up to have Chris back. He was such a good guy, but he was in such pain. And yeah, it was just a necessity. I wanted guys not, I wanted my guys not to suffer anymore, when they got out, because we get out and we think civilian world's got to be easy compared to what we just went through. But you guys have it rough. It's very, very rough what civilian people do without the military. The military, everything's laid out for you: how you dress, your haircut, how you speak, where to go, what to do to promote, your pay scale, like everything's laid out for you. In the civilian world, it's
It's a
good
good
luck. Hopefully, yeah, it's terrible. It's very, very tough. But the military definitely has discipline for sure.
your nonprofit. Now, who do you reach and how long has it been up and running?
We're going on our second year. Third year will start in January, and it's for my community, combat controllers and our families. And we do everything from sometimes a guy just needs for us to look at his resume, or with the network that I developed just running for office, job connections, right? Jobs are always kind of top of the priority list. The other thing is mental health. Um,
So
is
important.
get out, and yeah, they just struggle, what's so funny is because in the military, the job we had, we're so used to being in control, we're so used to mitigating risk, we're so used to
Yep.
like having a plan of, if this doesn't work, then we go do this, then we do this, a bump plan. But in the civilian world, and when you don't know what's wrong and you can't control your head and why you feel down, it's a terrible feeling, so my nonprofit puts guys together, and we have retreats to get them to get this guy level, and also to let them know that it's a team guy that runs this thing. So it's I've been there. I've been exactly where a lot of these guys have been, and we treat their families, because obviously we put our families through a whole lot, of worry, and sure, we make them mad at times. It's we have to treat the family members so that way they have a cohesive unit at the end, and they can get back to living a good life, and or at least at peace. And peace is something that it's, when you're young, you don't really value it. You don't realize how amazing it is to just be at
I
peace.
totally agree with you. There's nothing like peace
Mhm.
of mind. And that's something that we don't talk about. I mean, we look at the suicide rates and we look at mental illness in our country. And we don't take it seriously, especially after COVID. But you served our country, a philanthropist running a nonprofit and ran for Congress. I have so much respect for you. where
Thank
can
you.
where can viewers check out your website or help out or give back to your nonprofit?
Let's see. Yeah, I guess everything's pretty much at your fingertips, but firstthere.org. The word first is not spelled out. It's the number one, STTHERE.org. And then on Instagram, I think we're the first ones that come up. Same thing, firstthere.org or First There Foundation. But yeah, we have a shop. We have obviously a donation button, and it's a 501. So I mean, everything's it goes back to the guys. We have very little overhead. It's the whole motto now that kind of came up this year was we move as a team and never alone. And we've really, I think the guys, the Scarlet Beret Gala, which will be in Florida next year. You should come to it now that you got me on your podcast. I think you should come to it. It's a blast. We honor our fallen. We honor the guys that are alive. Our
I just
families
say,
come. It's
I,
awesome. Yeah, you should come.
hey,
Yeah,
you
it's
know what?
great.
I will come. Another
Yeah,
thing we talked about is faith, and that's
yeah,
another thing that's missing in people's lives is we have so many people suffering from mental illness, and there's no faith, and they create nonprofits with buildings and food, and they feed them and they house them, but they're empty on the inside. So what
yeah.
you're doing is amazing, and I love it. I think you're going to help so many.
No,
So
thank you. Yeah, it's your soul's got to be intact, because the mind, your body, I think it was kind of what got me through the first part was the first year or two when I was having thoughts of suicide and stuff. It was like, okay, maybe it's testosterone. I just left the teams. I got to work out, so I was just working out, but I still felt weird. And then God just has a way of, for me, I would sit in the first
there's a
pew of my
purpose.
church, and yeah, and I would just pray. And I got to be honest that at first I didn't really understand why he was punishing me, because I was like, I've always been a good guy, and I just want to end it. Like, why don't you just take me? I'm tired of suffering. And it was just, but at the same time, we just don't quit, so you just got to
So
kept going back and back. And then this nonprofit, and then Congress, and then just different things that just kind of keeps you going. But you gotta believe, faith is great, but you truly got to believe that God has a better plan for you. And it might be rough, but you got to just keep moving forward, and little by little, and it gets there.
I completely agree. The Lord himself suffered. I think those who suffer are chosen. Are
Yeah.
we better than him? Thank you so much for coming on. I will plug
Yeah.
your website as well. Whatever I can do to help. You have a fan
Yeah.
here.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you. Let me know if I can help you in any way, for sure.
Absolutely.